Hi, this is live looping tutorial video number 200. I'm going to look back at how we got to this point because I can't quite make sense of it. So maybe if I meditate on it from my own point of view, I will make sense of it. And if not, then I will just monologue at you for a little while. I started doing this series in the fall of 2017 is when I launched the Patreon and started doing these videos on a regular basis. There were a few reasons I started it in the first place. One of them was that I wanted to do something that I owned, that was completely my own thing. Everything I'd been doing up until then had basically been working for other people or other entities or other organizations as a teacher or transcriber or something like that. And as many creative people find at various points in their lives, there came a point in pretty much every one of those gigs where I had a verbal assurance that there would be plenty of work, and there was until there wasn't. And then suddenly there was not plenty of work. Sometimes there was a much reduced workload. Sometimes there was no work at all. So when I started it in the fall of 2017, I really wanted to be my own boss and call my own shots and have something that was completely under my control and I could do what I wanted to with it. I had thought about doing some kind of crowdfunding for a while, and talking about looping seemed like a good idea, partially because it was something that I knew pretty well, and also it felt like something that wasn't really being addressed in the way that I like to address it. I guess I'm interested in aspects of looping that are not very commonplace. I don't know. It's like the saying that goes that someone who's truly insane doesn't actually believe that they're insane. I don't think what I like doing is all that strange, but I can also recognize that it's not very common from what I can tell, I guess. So looping was something I've been doing for a long time. I had been doing it for a long time already when I started the Patreon. And it seemed at that point, and had seemed, and continues to seem like I had some interests in it that were a little unusual. So I felt like I could bring something to the table that was not just another gear video or another gear tutorial, and certainly not another gear review. I've never felt like I was doing reviews with any of this stuff. I've always felt like the idea has been to explore gear and look at things it can do. So for the first few years, from fall of 2017 up until spring of 2021, it was all Echoplex Digital Pro. And that's because up until that point, that's the only looper I had ever owned or used in any kind of depth. That was what I knew really well. It's still what I know really well. I don't think I will ever have the kind of relationship with another piece of gear that I do with the EDP, just because, you know, next year will be 2025, and that will be the 30th anniversary of when I got my first Echoplex Digital Pro. So I don't know if I'm still going to be around 30 years from now. I hope I am, but it's hard for me to imagine that I'm going to focus on one specific piece of gear in that time in the way that I focused on the EDP. And it just, you know, it was a good match, I guess. It just kind of seduced me and seemed inspiring and continues to. And I also found that there was a lot of room to grow with it. A lot of the stuff that I do with the EDP, I didn't start doing for several years. Until after I'd had it for a long time and started getting into some of the less conventional, more esoteric kind of functions. So for about 17, 18, 19, 20, a little over 3 years, it was all EDP all the time. When I started the Patreon, I was doing 4 videos a month. And it's a little embarrassing to look back at the production quality for those videos, but I think I was able to get the point across pretty well in those. The thing that changed the all EDP thing was basically people sent me stuff to work with. Glue Effects sent me a Lupe with the idea that I could do some beta testing and do some tutorial videos on it. And that was because a lot of the Lupe is based on the EDP architecture. It's not often that knowing a lot about the EDP has been a particular advantage, but that was a point where it was. So I was thrilled to do that. And as much as the Lupe takes from the EDP, there's also quite a bit that it does that is completely its own thing. So dealing with that, particularly the reed effects category of things on the lupe, was the first time I had really dealt with new looping concepts and functions in any kind of detail for many, many years. And it was scary, but it was also exciting to realize that I kind of could learn new stuff and could find new functionality that was interesting to me, that I liked the sound of and that I liked the experience of working with. Right around the same time, Poly Effects asked if they could send me a Bebo. And there again, they reached out to me specifically because the Bebo used a module called Loopler, which is a live looping module built largely off of an open source project called Super Looper, which is itself built largely off of the EDP. So in the case of both the Lupe and the Bebo, it was a question of I was a good candidate to work with those devices. And those two were really kind of the gateway drugs that got me thinking about the world outside of the EDP. Shortly thereafter, I got my hands on a Looperlative LP2. One of my Patreon people gave me an LP2, very generously, obviously. They had an LP1. They said they didn't need the LP2, and they were interested to see what I would do with it. So Lupe, Bebo, LP2, that all kind of came into my life, fell into my lap basically in 2021. And towards the end of 2021, I started thinking about reaching out to people and being more proactive and trying to explore new pieces of gear. It was great to have people offer to send me the Lupe and the Bebo and the Looperlative LP2, but I was also curious to be a little more proactive and knock on some doors and see if people would be interested in giving me stuff to talk about. Long story short is that a few people did, most people did not, which is fine. So a lot of the gear that I've been talking about for the last couple of years, I bought on my own Steam as a regular customer. And that's fine. Nobody owes me any gear. Nobody has to do anything for me. So I'm not sitting here all bitter because I didn't get more free gear than I already did. But that was really the point when I started not just exploring other devices in depth, but started trying to acquaint myself with the world of looping outside of my own head. Because up till then, I hadn't paid a lot of attention to it. I was kind of peripherally aware of some of the things that were going on. I was aware that Chase Bliss had been doing a lot of really cool stuff with the blooper and the mood and that kind of thing. I had a rough idea about some of the Loop Station, Roland, and Boss RC series stuff. But I wasn't super well acquainted with the stuff, either in terms of what was out there or in terms of what kind of functionality these different devices offered. So I started exploring and getting the lay of the land. And I was really pleasantly surprised to find that I could do stuff with other devices that were not based on the EDP architecture, that did not necessarily have a lot of the functions that I had grown very accustomed to. So realizing I could use new gear or gear that was new to me and have some insights into it, have something to say about it, be able to make music that I liked the process of and liked the result of, I don't think anyone has been more surprised about that than I have been. So for instance, it was not that long ago that I was convinced that if a looper did not have a momentary replace function, then I would not be able to use it. I was so used to using that particular function and so attached to the way that I use it that the idea of trying to do looping without that function was very foreign to me. Now I honestly can't remember the last time I used a momentary replace function. It's been months at least. I think. I don't remember exactly, but I've definitely been doing a lot of looping that did not involve that. And it was not that long ago that I didn't think that was possible. So kind of reaching out to the world and exploring that has been really, really good on a personal level, really gratifying just because it means that I don't have all my looping eggs in one particular basket with the EDP or a couple of baskets with the EDP and the Lupe and the Bebo. There's a lot of stuff that I like using, and it seems like I have some perspectives on it that other people are maybe not covering. So that's been really gratifying and a really pleasant surprise. That has definitely been a win as far as that goes. It's also been the first time that I really thought about this channel and this content in any kind of serious way. And what I mean by that is that when I started this video series, when I started the Patreon, I knew right away that the EDP was such an obscure subject, I was not particularly focused on how many views or subscribers I was getting. I knew it was very obscure stuff. And the purpose was not really to get a lot of views or a lot of subscribers. It was first and foremost just to document this stuff, because it was stuff I knew that didn't seem to be very widely talked about, and not wanting to be morbid, but I didn't want that information to die with me. I mean, I'm planning on sticking around as long as I can. And I'm not the only person in the world who knows that stuff, but there are not a lot of us out there who are really deep into the EDP. And those of us that are don't tend to make a lot of documentation about it, I would say. So initially I was really not thinking in terms of how many subscribers I got, how many views I got, how much currency I might have with the greater looping world. When I started reaching out to other devices, other manufacturers, when I started doing content for a broader audience, I started thinking about that stuff for the first time ever, basically. And that's been a sobering thing. You know, it is not a huge surprise, but I have definitely been reminded that what I do is pretty niche. It's not mass appeal stuff, either purely musically or in terms of the kind of stuff I talk about. And that's okay. I don't have ambitions of being a huge influencer. It would be nice to have more views. It would be nice to have more YouTube royalties, certainly. It would be nice to get more free gear, but that's never been a driving force for me for doing the videos in the first place. So the fact that I haven't become like the looping version of Rick Beato or Emily Hopkins or something, it's okay. I was never really expecting that to be the case. Reaching out to companies and not getting gear from them is okay. I don't expect that. Reaching out to companies and not getting a response from them has been, like I say, a sobering experience. Realizing how little currency what I do and have done and have to offer holds for most of the manufacturers out there, again, has been sobering. I don't want to sit here and whine about that, because I have a tremendous amount to be grateful for. And considering what problems people have to deal with in the world, moaning that I don't have more views or more subscribers or more gear being sent to me seems ridiculous. So I'm not going to sit here and be woe is me about that. But it has kind of reinforced the idea that, you know, what I do is kind of obscure and kind of unusual. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm still curious as to what kind of reach I can have potentially, but I'm curious about doing that on my own terms. I've had people tell me that if I did clickbait thumbnail face in my YouTube thumbnails, and if I made goofy faces of amazement and shock and surprise and thumbs up with big pictures of the gear, and clickbaity titles, I've had people who I take very seriously as people and musicians tell me that I should do that and I would get more views. Maybe they're right. I haven't found myself sufficiently inclined to try it yet. Maybe the next video I have will be total clickbait thumbnail face. I have no idea. Probably not. It's still hard for me to believe that that is going to make the difference between people checking me out or not, but maybe I will put that to the test one of these days. A friend of mine who's a great musician, quite well established, quite well known, who has done a fair number of video tutorials of their own, recently made the comment that they felt that my videos were kind of like the equivalent of going to college, which was not my intent necessarily, and it's not like I feel like I walk around being this one-man fount of higher education when it comes to anything. But I know that I do go into more detail, and I know that I talk about stuff that is more esoteric and probably more complex. I definitely tend to assume that viewers have a certain baseline of knowledge about things. Partially because there are lots of people who do beginning looping tutorial videos better than I ever could. You know, that's what they're good at. That's what they're interested in doing. That's no disrespect to any of those people, but that's kind of how they think about looping. They think about it in a fairly fundamental way. So they're great candidates to demonstrate that and talk about it and to teach it. I don't seem to think about stuff in a fundamental way, and it's not a qualitative judgment at all. It doesn't make what I do any better or worse. It just means that I'm a weirdo, and there's not a ton of interest in that. And that's okay. You know, that is what it is. And I have so much to be grateful for, musically in particular, and as a human being in general. Again, it feels ridiculous to complain about not having more video views or notoriety or influencer status or any of that kind of thing. So that's kind of been where I've been at for the last couple of years. I don't know what the future holds. I'm going to keep making tutorial videos for sure. I don't know where it's going to go. If you had told me 2 years ago that I was going to be doing the kind of content that I have been doing, I would have been very surprised. So I kind of optimistically hope that I will be able to look back a year or two from now at the stuff that I do between now and then and also be surprised, hopefully pleasantly so. But I would like to keep learning, and I'd like to keep expanding my own understanding of this stuff. And if my findings and my study of this kind of thing happens to be of relevance to somebody else, that's fantastic. So until the next stage, thank you as always for tuning in. Bye-bye.